I've been married to Jessica for 5 years, and like any couple, we had our ups and downs. We met in college, both young and ambitious, and built a life together that I thought was pretty solid. We didn't have kids yet, but we had dreams, plans, and what I believed was a deep love. But lately, something felt off. It started with small things, the way she would lock her phone whenever I walked into the room, or how she would often take longer than usual to get ready for work. I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to stress from her job as a marketing manager. But then I began to notice more concerning changes. The way she dressed had shifted. She started wearing tighter clothes, more makeup, and even a new scent. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it felt different, more alluring. I found myself questioning the newfound obsession with her appearance. I become hyper-aware of the little things. Why was she suddenly more secretive about her phone? Why did she take girl nights at least once a week, claiming it was for work networking? The excuses didn't sit right with me. 1. Friday evening, I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when Jessica came home later than usual, flustered and a bit too cheerful for my taste. The smell of her perfume was overwhelmingly sweet, almost intoxicating, and definitely not the usual scent I had grown accustomed to. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut, but it was persistent, like a stubborn itch I couldn't scratch. I decided to dig a bit deeper. Jessica's phone, sitting unattended on the kitchen counter, beckoned me. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. My heart raced as I picked it up. I was greeted by the sight of several notifications from a number I didn't recognize. The messages were flirtatious, filled with emojis and laughter that made my stomach churn. I didn't even have to scroll far to see it. I felt a lump forming in my throat, and before I knew it, I was reading a message that confirmed my worst fears. "I can't wait to be with you tonight." That was it. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I couldn't believe it. My hands trembled as I placed the phone back on the counter, feeling sick to my stomach. Jessica walked in and I could barely meet her eyes. She noticed something was off, but I played it cool, pretending to be engrossed in my own phone. The next day I confronted her. I waited until we were both home and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. "Jessica, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she instinctively knew where this was heading. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I could see through her act. "I found messages on your phone, messages from someone else." The declaration hung between us like a heavy fog, and I could see the color drain from her face. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she laughed, a hollow, nervous laugh. "Oh, please, don't be ridiculous. You're overthinking again," she said, but even her tone felt defensive. I pushed further, laying out the evidence like a prosecutor with a solid case. "I'm not overthinking. I saw the messages, Jess. I know you're cheating on me." The words tasted bitter and I felt an unfamiliar rage boiling inside me. Her reaction, it was a mix of anger and denial. "You're crazy. Those messages don't mean anything. You're just being paranoid," she yelled, and I could see the sheer audacity in her eyes. The lies just kept spilling out, and it was painful to watch. As I stood there, feeling the weight of betrayal crashing down on me, I realized this was only the beginning. I felt my heart breaking, but a new feeling emerged, the burning desire for revenge. I didn't know how or when, but I was going to make her pay for this. In that moment, I decided to take control. I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. I would turn the tables and ensure she learned the hard way that actions have consequences. I was about to enter a dark chapter of my life, one where revenge would be my guiding star. But first, I needed to figure out my next steps. What would be the best way to confront this situation? What were my options? It was clear I couldn't let this go. It was time to devise a plan. After that confrontation, the air between Jessica and me was thick with tension. I felt as if I was walking on eggshells, both of us avoiding the elephant in the room. She acted as if everything was normal, cooking dinner and making small talk, but I could see through her facade. I was a mess inside, and I needed to channel that energy into something productive. The idea of revenge was like an itch I couldn't scratch. The first step was to gather more evidence. I had already seen those messages, but I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I started paying closer attention to her habits. I followed her one night when she left for her girls' night. I couldn't believe I was doing this, but my gut told me it was necessary. I parked a few blocks away from the restaurant she claimed she was going to. I waited in my car, trying to calm my racing heart. After about an hour of watching the restaurant, I saw her walk in, her head held high, laughing with friends. I almost turned away, convincing myself it was just a night out, but something urged me to stay. Then a guy walked up to her. He was tall, with dark hair and a casual smile that made my stomach turn. They greeted each other with an embrace that felt way too familiar. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but I couldn't look away. As they sat down together, I could see their chemistry, flirting, touching, leaning in close to whisper secrets. I knew then that this wasn't just some fling. This was something deeper, something real. The guy was obviously younger, and I couldn't help but feel the pang of jealousy mixing with the anger boiling inside me. I had to get out of there before I did something stupid. Once home, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. The anger was overwhelming. I felt betrayed not just by Jessica, but by the life we had built together. I had to confront her again, armed with what I had just witnessed. But first, I needed to plan how to expose her. I decided to start with her friends. I knew some of the people she hung out with were in on this. I reached out to Sarah, one of her closest friends, under the pretense of catching up. I invited her over for drinks, making sure to keep the mood light. But beneath my calm exterior, I was a coiled spring ready to explode. When Sarah arrived, I laid on the charm, pouring drinks and engaging in casual conversation. I wanted to draw out any information I could about Jessica's recent behavior. But as the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice how tight-lipped Sarah was about Jessica's girl nights. It was frustrating, but I pressed on, dropping hints about Jessica acting strangely. "Have you noticed anything off about Jessica lately?" I asked casually, leaning back in my chair. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting around as if searching for the right answer. "I mean, she's just been really busy with work, I guess. A lot on her plate," she replied, clearly uncomfortable. I pressed further. "Yeah, but it seems like she's been out a lot more, right? Almost like she's trying to avoid something." At that, Sarah looked me straight in the eye. "Honestly, I wouldn't worry too much. Jess has her stuff together. Maybe she just needs some space." Space? That's rich. It felt like she was feeding me a line, and the thought of it only fueled my resolve. I decided to let it go for the night, but I was convinced that Sarah knew more than she was letting on. After Sarah left, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The reality of Jessica's betrayal was becoming clearer, and I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this continue. It was time to put my plan into action. I started devising a way to catch her in the act. I thought about using her own methods against her. Maybe I could turn her friends into allies. I could reach out to the guy I'd seen with her, find out just how deep this went. It was a risky move, but I was desperate for answers, and I wouldn't let her walk all over me without a fight. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of what to do next. I had a new mission: uncover the truth and make her regret ever crossing me. My heart felt heavy, but I was determined to find out everything. I felt like a detective piecing together a case. The next step was going to be crucial. I needed to keep my cool while I executed this plan. I had to stay focused and not let my emotions get the better of me. It was time to take back control of my life. I was done being the victim in this situation. I would be the one calling the shots from now on. I just had to figure out how to make it all happen without losing my own sanity in the process. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to face it head on. With a newfound resolve, I knew I had to put my plan into motion. The first step was to find out more about the guy who was seeing Jessica. I didn't even know his name, but I was determined to discover who he was. My mind raced with possibilities, and I had to make sure I approached this carefully. I couldn't just go storming in blind. I remembered Jessica had mentioned a networking event a few weeks back, where she claimed to have met some new contacts. I decided to dig into that. I asked her about it during dinner one night, maintaining my composure. "So how did that networking event go? Did you meet anyone interesting?" Her response was quick and defensive. "Oh, just the usual. You know how those things are, lots of people trying to sell their products." The way she avoided eye contact made me uneasy, and I could sense she was hiding something. I needed to find out if this guy was someone she worked with or someone from her social circle. I spent countless hours online, searching for any clues, scouring her social media for hints. I finally stumbled upon a photo that made my heart race. It was a group shot from the event she had attended, and there he was, that same tall guy with dark hair, grinning like he owned the world. His name was Mark. I did a quick search and found out he worked at a rival marketing firm. That gave me a clear direction. I made a decision. I was going to confront him, but not in a way that would raise alarms. I needed to be strategic about this. The next day, I crafted a plan to reach out to Mark. I created a fake social media account, using a generic name like Mike Thompson and a profile with no connections. I sent him a friend request, hoping to catch him unaware. I figured if he was involved with Jessica, he might not think twice about accepting a request from a friendly face. Within hours, he accepted my request. It felt like a small victory, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. I sent him a direct message, playing it cool. "Hey, Mark, I saw you at that event last week. We should grab a drink sometime." To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, eager to meet up. "Absolutely. I'd love to connect. How about Thursday?" I could hardly contain my excitement. This was going to be my chance to gather intel and get to the bottom of what was happening. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. As the day approached, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. I planned our meetup at a local bar where I could keep it casual. I wanted to appear relaxed, but inside I was a ticking time bomb, ready to explode with anger and resentment. When Thursday finally arrived, I walked into the bar, spotting Mark sitting at a table. He was exactly as I had seen in the picture, confident and charming. I approached him with a grin, shaking his hand. "Hey man, great to finally meet in person." We started chatting, and I kept the conversation light at first. We discussed work, sports, and the usual topics that guys bond over. I could see why Jessica was drawn to him. He had that effortless charisma. It made my blood boil, but I had to keep my composure. As the night wore on, I subtly steered the conversation toward Jessica. "So you guys have met before, right?" She mentioned an event where you linked up. Mark smiled, and I could see him relaxing. "Yeah, Jessica's great. We clicked instantly. She's got some amazing ideas." My heart sank as I listened to him rave about her, but there it was, the confirmation I needed. They had a connection that went beyond professional. I feigned interest, asking more questions about their interactions. "So, are you guys working together on anything?" I probed, trying to sound casual. His response hit me like a brick. "Well, we've gone out for drinks a few times. You know how it is, networking and all." I barely managed to hold my composure. "Networking my ass." I forced a chuckle, but inside I was boiling with rage. "Yeah, networking," I echoed, keeping my tone light despite the storm brewing inside me. As the evening continued, I learned more than I bargained for. Mark mentioned how Jessica had confided in him about her frustrations with her marriage, painting me as the bad guy. It felt like a slap to the face. She was manipulating the narrative, and I was the villain in her little story. At that moment, I had to make a choice. Did I reveal who I was? Did I confront him with the truth? But then I realized I had more to gain by keeping my identity hidden. I needed more information. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. As the night wound down, we exchanged numbers, and I left with a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't just going to confront Jessica. I was going to confront them both. I would expose their affair and make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. Mark had no idea who I really was, and that was my advantage. I'd keep this charade going for as long as I needed to. I could feel the pieces of my revenge falling into place, and I was ready to take the next step. When I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling of anger and betrayal. I replayed the evening in my mind, and while I felt a sense of power in the knowledge I had gained, I also felt a deep sadness. I had loved Jessica once, and now I was on the path to destroying everything we had built. There was no turning back. I had a plan, and it was time to execute it. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for me. I felt like I was living in a double life. By day, I was a husband pretending that everything was fine. By night, I was a man on a mission, fueled by anger and betrayal. Jessica seemed oblivious to my internal struggle, continuing her routine of girl nights and late work hours. Each time she left, my heart raced with a mix of hurt and determination. I focused on communicating with Mark, using the fake account. We exchanged messages over the next week, and every time he mentioned Jessica, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I was playing a dangerous game and I knew it, but I was gathering information that I planned to use to confront both of them. Finally, I reached a point where I felt ready to execute my plan. It was the following Friday evening, and Jessica was scheduled to meet Mark again, supposedly for drinks after work. I had a feeling this was going to be the night I would finally confront them. I decided to have my own little meet-up with them. I picked a bar just a few blocks from where they were supposed to be, a place I knew they would frequent. I arrived early and sat at the bar, nursing a drink and trying to calm my racing heart. I was a mix of anxious energy and simmering anger. As I waited, I thought about how I would approach the situation. Would I confront them together? Would I catch them in the act? My mind raced with possibilities. I was so consumed by my thoughts that I nearly missed the sight of Jessica walking in with Mark. They were laughing, and as they made their way to a table in a corner, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I took a deep breath and followed them, positioning myself where I could see and hear everything. I could feel the bile rising in my throat as I watched them lean in close, whispering and sharing intimate moments. It was surreal, watching the woman I once loved betray me right in front of my eyes. As I sat there, I could feel my anger boiling over, but I had to wait for the right moment. I wanted them both to feel the weight of their actions, to understand the pain they were causing. I pulled out my phone and started recording the scene. I wanted evidence, something to show them how low they had sunk. I captured their laughter, their flirtation, and the way they were clearly lost in their own world. It was sickening. Then I saw Mark lean in and whisper something in her ear which made her laugh. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked over to their table. "Jessica, Mark," I said, my voice steady but laced with anger. Both of them turned to look at me, their expressions shifting from surprise to confusion. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jessica stammered, her eyes wide. I mustered every ounce of calm I could find. "I think the real question is, what the hell are both of you doing here together?" Mark looked between us, clearly caught off guard. I think there's been a misunderstanding," he started, but I cut him off. "Misunderstanding? No, I think you've both made it very clear." I gestured to the empty chair at their table. "Mind if I join you?" Jessica shot me a panicked glance, her mask of confidence slipping. "This isn't what it looks like, Jason. We were just what? Networking. Because I've seen the messages, Jessica. I've seen the way you two interact. This isn't just business," I interrupted, letting my anger seep into my words. Mark opened his mouth to defend himself, but I turned to him, my voice low and menacing. "You think it's cute to mess with someone else's marriage? You're just a rebound, and you have no idea what you've just walked into." The tension in the air was palpable. Jessica's face turned crimson, and I could see panic setting in. "You need to leave, Jason. You're making a scene," she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice shaking. "No, I'm just making the truth known. This is the reality of what you've chosen. You can't keep living this lie." At that moment, the bartender approached, sensing the commotion. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, eyeing our tense trio. "Everything's fine," Jessica said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, it's not," I said, and I felt that rush of adrenaline again. "I'm just exposing the truth about how my wife has been cheating on me." The bartender looked between us, and I could see the recognition of the situation dawn on him. "Maybe you should all take this outside," he suggested, and I felt a sense of satisfaction as I saw Jessica's face pale. "Good idea," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's take it outside so we can really talk about this." I led the way to the outside patio, and as we stepped into the cool night air, the weight of what I was doing settled in. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and a bit of exhilaration. This was it, time to lay everything out on the table. "Let's talk about what's really going on here," I said, looking at both of them. Jessica crossed her arms defensively, and Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mark, you may think you've got it all figured out, but you're just a placeholder in her life," I said, my voice steady. "Jessica, you need to face the consequences of your choices." Jessica's expression hardened, and she finally spoke up. "I can't believe you would do this." You're acting like a jealous child." "Jealous? No, hurt, definitely," I shot back. "You've made your choices, and I'm here to let you know that I won't be a fool anymore." Mark, who had been silent until now, finally chimed in. "Look, I didn't know you were married. I thought you two were having problems. Jessica never mentioned—" "Stop right there," I interrupted. "This isn't about you. This is about the betrayal I've faced from both of you. You need to take responsibility for your actions." The confrontation felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, even as I prepared for whatever fallout was to come. I was ready to face Jessica, her lies, and the reality of our marriage. I wouldn't let her walk all over me any longer. I was determined to make her realize the damage she had caused, not just to our relationship, but to herself as well. As the night wore on, I knew that this was only the beginning. The emotional fallout would be intense, but I felt empowered by taking control of the situation. I was no longer the victim. I was the one calling the shots. The aftermath of this confrontation would shape my next steps, and I was ready for whatever came next. The confrontation on the patio was tense, charged with emotions that had been building for far too long. Jessica was visibly shaken, her defenses crumbling as the reality of her decisions hit her. Mark, on the other hand, seemed caught in the crossfire, unsure of how to navigate the chaos. I felt a mix of satisfaction and bitterness. I had finally confronted them both, but the bitterness of betrayal still lingered. "Look," I said, trying to regain control of the situation. "This isn't just about me catching you. It's about the choices you both made. Jessica, you've lied to me repeatedly, and Mark, while you may not have known I existed, you've played a part in this deception." Jessica's eyes flashed with anger, but underneath it I could see her fear. "You're overreacting. This isn't what you think," she insisted, her voice wavering. "Isn't it? You've been sneaking around behind my back, meeting up with him, and pretending everything is fine at home. What else should I think?" I shot back, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "Maybe it wouldn't have come to this if you had paid more attention to me," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "I was feeling lonely. We've been distant for so long." Her words stung, and I could feel the weight of her accusations hanging in the air. "So what? You thought sleeping with someone else was the solution. You didn't even try to talk to me." Mark shifted uncomfortably as the argument escalated, clearly realizing that this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. "Maybe we should all just take a breath and talk this out calmly," he suggested, trying to mediate the escalating situation. "Calmly? After what I just witnessed? You think that's possible?" I snapped, glaring at him. I didn't want him to play the peacemaker. He was part of the problem. Jessica took a moment, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to feel alive again. I didn't know how to fix things with you." Her admission hit me hard. I had sensed her drifting away, but hearing her say it out loud was like a punch to the gut. "So you thought cheating was the answer, huh? That's your solution? I thought you didn't care anymore. You were always busy with work, and I felt invisible." She cried, her voice breaking. I could feel my heart twisting in my chest at her words. It was true. I had been preoccupied with my job, our bills, and the stress of life. But instead of communicating, she had chosen betrayal. "You could have talked to me, Jess. You could have told me how you felt. But no, you chose to keep me in the dark and betray my trust." Mark remained silent, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the confrontation intensified. I could see that he wasn't prepared for this emotional storm, and honestly, I didn't care. I was focused on Jessica, wanting her to understand just how deeply she had hurt me. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with pain. "You've shattered the trust we built together. You've hurt not just me, this affects your life, our life, the marriage we promised to fight for." Jessica looked down, her shoulders slumping as reality washed over her. "I know, I messed up. I'm so sorry," she whispered, the sincerity of her apology evident in her tone. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Jess. Sorry doesn't fix the damage," I replied, feeling the sting of her betrayal. "You need to own this, and you need to decide what you want moving forward. Do you want to fight for us, or are you done?" "Don't put me on the spot like this," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I want right now." "Maybe I should just back off entirely," Mark interjected, looking between us. "I didn't mean to complicate things." "No, you're in this too, Mark. You don't get to back off now. You chose to pursue a married woman and you need to face the consequences just like she does." I shot back, my anger directed at him. The air was thick with tension as I stood my ground, unwilling to let either of them off the hook so easily. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, but I also knew I needed to channel it into something constructive. "I can't just walk away from this. I loved you, Jessica. I wanted to build a life with you. And now everything feels broken," I said, my voice softening as I struggled to keep the tears at bay. "I know I ruined everything," she replied, her eyes glistening. "I was foolish. I thought I could find a spark somewhere else, but I see now that it was all a mistake. I want to fix this." Her words were a small glimmer of hope, but I couldn't fully trust them just yet. "Do you really mean that? Are you willing to commit to rebuilding what's been broken?" "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice earnest. "I do want to lose you." I glanced over at Mark, who was still silently observing our confrontation. "You're not off the hook either. I expect you to take responsibility for your part in this, and I'll be sharing everything with our mutual friends. They need to know how you operate." His face paled and he nodded slowly. "I get it. I'll do whatever you want, but I never meant to hurt anyone." I met Jessica's gaze, and for the first time that night I felt a flicker of hope. "We have a long road ahead of us if we're going to fix this, but it starts with honesty and accountability. No more lies, no more secrets." As we stood outside that bar, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. The confrontation had been brutal but necessary. It was time to face the reality of our shattered marriage, and I was ready to see if there was a way back. I wasn't sure how it would all unfold, but I felt empowered by my decision to confront the truth. The next steps wouldn't be easy, but I was committed to seeing this through. I owed it to myself, and I owed it to Jessica. If we were going to move forward, we had to be willing to do the hard work together. As I walked away from that night, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head on. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to emerge stronger. I would take control of my life and make sure that no matter what happened next, I would hold my head high. In the days that followed the confrontation, Jessica and I embarked on an emotional roller coaster. It wasn't easy. Every moment felt heavy with tension. We had conversations that lasted hours, dissecting the reasons behind her infidelity, the cracks in our marriage, and what we both needed to do to heal. Jessica was open about her mistakes, and I found myself listening to her in a way I hadn't before. She talked about feeling neglected and unappreciated, and as painful as it was to hear, I realized that there was truth in her words. I had been so focused on my job and the pressures of life that I had unintentionally sidelined her needs. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew I had to accept my part in this mess. We started attending couples counseling, something I had initially been skeptical about. The therapist guided us through exercises that forced us to confront our feelings honestly. It was as though we were peeling back the layers of our relationship, revealing the vulnerabilities we had hidden from each other. There were moments of anger, tears, and raw honesty, but we were both committed to the process. Jessica made a genuine effort to change. She started expressing her feelings more openly, and I learned to check in with her regularly, making sure she felt heard and valued. It was a slow process, but each small step brought us a little closer together. I was wary, of course. Trust doesn't just come back overnight, but I could see that she was trying. Mark, on the other hand, was a different story. I had made it clear to both of them that I would be sharing the details of their affair with our mutual friends. Word spread quickly, and while it was uncomfortable, I felt a sense of empowerment in taking that stand. Mark's reputation took a hit, and I couldn't lie and say that didn't feel satisfying. He was forced to confront the consequences of his actions, just as Jessica and I were. The hardest part was coming to terms with my feelings of betrayal. There were nights when anger would seep back in, but it became easier to lean on Jessica through those moments. We learned to communicate better, and I found myself opening up about my own fears and insecurities. As time passed, I noticed subtle changes in our relationship. We began to reconnect in ways I hadn't thought possible. We spend weekends exploring new places, rekindling that spark we had lost. It was as if we were dating again, rediscovering the joy in each other's company. Yet the shadow of her affair still loomed over us. I would occasionally catch myself questioning her motives or feeling a pang of jealousy, but with each confrontation, we would address those feelings head-on, reinforcing the commitment we had made to rebuild our trust. After months of hard work in therapy, we reached a turning point. One evening, as we sat on our porch, sipping wine and watching the sun set, Jessica turned to me with a serious expression. "I know I messed up and I don't want you to ever forget that," she said softly. "But I also want you to know that I'm here now. I want to fight for us, for our marriage." I felt a surge of emotion as I looked into her eyes. "I want that too, Jessica. I want to make this work, but it'll take time. We'll have to keep communicating and being honest with each other." She nodded, and in that moment, I realized that while the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, we were both willing to walk it together. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I learned some valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of communication in a relationship. Betrayal had shaken the foundation of our marriage, but it also forced us to confront our weaknesses and become stronger. I had once felt like a victim, but through this journey, I realized I had the power to reclaim my life and my happiness. While Jessica's infidelity would always be a part of our story, it no longer defined us. We had faced the storm, and now we were learning to rebuild. From the wreckage, as we moved forward, I felt hopeful. We had a long way to go, but the commitment we had made to each other was genuine. We were no longer just partners, we were allies, willing to fight for the love we had almost lost. And that was something worth holding on to.